All right, many thanks for staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. My name is Romeo Busiku. This is the #1 platform that is geared towards acquainting you with that #1 information that you need. We can also continue touting the significance, importance, health benefits that will accrue in your body when you actually sip on a cup of Inspire Africa coffee. Do not make a mistake. Do not resuscitate your body's creative processes by not sipping on this very, very powerful, magical cup of Inspire Africa coffee. That aside, we are going to be talking about the status of socio-protection within our country, the sage money. This is a continuation of the conversation I've been having with Henry and Frank. We want to talk about the 100,000 COVID-19 relief funds and also the socio-assistance grant for empowerment. The social protection programs in this country, how strong are they and how largely have they been beneficial to the people of this country who are grappling with the onset or onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic? I do have Patrick Katabazi. He's not new to this show of platform. He's been here a couple of times. He's a policy specialist under the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Socio Protection. A very good morning, Patrick Katabazi, and thank you for joining us.
Yes, good morning.
It's been a while, but I see you are still in good shape.
Yes, I am.
How have you been doing?
Yes, happy to be back.
Indeed.
I've been very well.
Largely, you are doing well, healthy-wise. COVID-19, yes. How has it affected you personally?
Yes, we have survived so far.
I see.
The COVID-19 and its effects, and we're hoping for the best as people get vaccinated.
You know, I always have a smile streaking from ear to ear when I see a comrade with whom we've been grappling during this COVID-19 pandemic, many of whom have not had the luxury to actually even watch Morning at NTV right now because they've succumbed to COVID-19. 4.7, and it is 4.7 million people across the world. In this country, Uganda, 3,152. Very colorful situation. But largely, welcome to Morning at NTV.
The pressure is mine.
Can you help us shine a light on the status, or a situation analysis, if you will, on the status of socio-protection responses to COVID-19 by our central government? Issues to do with SAGE, Nabanja's money, and so forth.
Yes, to put social protection into perspective, we are talking about public and private interventions aiming at cushioning people against risks and vulnerabilities that occur in the life cycle. Here we are talking about the time when somebody gets born, walk through life to middle age, then become an older person and then ultimately die. So we are talking about all potential risks and vulnerabilities that are along that life cycle. So in Uganda circumstances, there are quite a number of programs. I'll talk about only a few that some of you could have heard about already. So in Uganda, key social protection programs that are being implemented include social assistance grants for empowerment, and the current focus is on the older persons right now under the program called the Senior Citizens Grant, and you must have heard from the previous speakers talking about that within the context of the International Older Persons Day that is happening tomorrow. Then we have a program now called the Public Works Program. Yeah. You must have heard of the Cash for Work program that is happening in quite a number of districts, particularly in Eastern.
Acquaint the viewer on what that really is about.
Yes. So here governments and local governments in particular put in place programs that encourage people come and work on those programs. It could be about roads, it could be about tree planting, with the view of providing short-term employment to the muntu wansi, to the common person. So this is a deliberate government effort to get people to work so that they can smoothen their income. So that program, those programs happening in Eastern Uganda and Northern Uganda, particularly under NSSF program. So there are other programs, social protection programs, like the disability grant. It is not yet so much streamlined like the older persons senior citizens grant, but it's also money that comes from government of Uganda. So there are other programs like Women Entrepreneurship Program. This is a social protection interventions in my view. Youth Rivalry Program is also a social protection intervention in my view. And many other programs like NSSF, like I talked about. So, but the key ones that are very common with us is possibly SAGE and the Public Works Program.
But largely, how effective have these socio-protection programs by government been effective during this COVID-19 pandemic? Have they rendered that effective help that many people are clamoring for?
Social protection coverage in Uganda is extremely very low, and particularly in Africa. In all over the world, the coverage of social protection is 45%. So 45% of the people all over the world are covered under social protection. In Africa, that share drops to 17%. In Uganda circumstances, you have less than 2% of the people that are even covered under social protection, clear-cut social protection interventions. So the coverage is extremely low. Some of the programs are effective to the people they target, but largely ineffective because you do not have many other interconnected social protection programs. So which of course then that one undermines their effectiveness. But again, we must admit that some of the social protection interventions require a lot of money. And that's why possibly you see most developed countries have coverage that is greater than for developing countries. In which case, therefore, then, one of the things that we must look at is progressively investing in social protection sector.
All right, Patrick Katabazi is talking about that there is low coverage for these social protection programs, and that the people they are supposed to be actually covering are not being helped in that regard. What exactly do we mean in this regard? Because there are 1.5 million elderly persons in this country, 1.5 million, but only 7,400 are benefiting from the socio-assistance grants for empowerment, meaning we need to do more to ensure that we cover more beneficiaries that could actually enjoy this money and also pull through the COVID-19 pandemic. So largely and by far, that's a conversation we are having right now on Morning at NTV. Challenges in social protection interventions and so forth. Soon we shall be joined by Kabahenda Flavia, that is Honorable Kabahenda Flavia, the committee chairperson in that regard, to also talk about this main conversation. But I'm still largely talking to Patrick Katabazi. What are some of the challenges in these social protection interventions, Mr. Katabazi?
Number one, biggest challenge is limited financing. As you possibly might have heard from the previous speakers, we have shortages across the board. The disability grant is not heavily funded. SAGE in itself, as we speak right now, in the budget for this current year, has a shortfall of about 30 plus billion. So limited financing year after year is a challenge. But also recall that the senior citizens grant, as an example, covers older persons who are 80 years in this national rollout. But again, the older person classification in our social protection policy is 65 years. So that also has a relationship with limited financing. The other issue again is that we have in the whole social protection sector is that we do not have a systematic approach towards social protection. Here we are only focusing on bits, on older persons separately. So we need to have a system that tracks human life through the life cycle. And in my view, that's when we can deal with all real and potential risks that affect the entire population. And of course, the other problem that we must have seen, especially so that was manifested by the Nemaja Monday, is lack of a system, a register that can be able to classify and cluster vulnerable persons or those who have potential risks.
No data.
So you don't have data in place, you don't even have a delivery system in place. So when you want to take an action, then you start grappling all sorts of things. You have money going to wrong people, you have the real vulnerable people being left out. So not having a register or a registry that is active or that is well put together is, in my view, also a very significant challenge.
Let's also bring in Honorable Flavia Kabahenda. She's joining us right now on set. Very good morning, by the way. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to get your 2 cents on this conversation. How effective have these social protection programs been during this COVID-19 pandemic? And any other information that you might want to divulge, please go ahead.
Good morning, viewers. Good morning, everyone. I am Kabahenda Flavia Rabhoro. I represent the people of Chegegwa district, and I am the chairperson of the Committee on Gender, Labour and Social Development. And of course, I am very passionate about social protection.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this morning, I'm privileged to be given the chance to discuss issues of social protection again. And like every day, we are not yet there. We are almost just beginning. Because when we have only about 2.8% of Ugandans being able to benefit from at least one of the social protection interventions, then we are not doing very well. Because then that means we need to up the game. That means there is no government will or political will, for that matter, for people of Uganda to be supported with social protection.
I see.
And now when we get COVID-19, it escalates the problem.
Yes, Honorable.
And the reason why government now should come back to the drawing board, because a lot of things got mixed up, including definitions of the very critical aspects on social protection or vulnerability.
Help us demystify that.
We must demystify a lot of things.
Like?
We must know that the people we thought were poor were actually, they proved not to be that poor. And those we thought were rich proved that they were actually not rich, because when you lose a job, you lose income, and then you go back to that man who kept in his banana plantation and he's the one feeding you. Then that means some of the definitions need to be really aligned to the fact that if you have a job and the job is not that secure for you, that even in times of pandemics you cannot sustain that job, then that means you are one of the people who are very susceptible to vulnerability. And I always tell the members of parliament that all of them are candidates of vulnerability.
Indeed.
All of us, including me. And therefore, that the speaker should have designated all of them to my committee, because we are all candidates of vulnerability. But that aside, I want to say that the system of social protection is very key, because that is when we synergize all the
post-development initiatives.
You see, the government is doing a lot of interventions of social protection.
I see.
To the war-ravaged places, to those who are hit by floods in Kasese, to those who suffered from COVID that were given relief. It was not only Nabanja money. There is money that was given to artists. Some of it came from Guru, some of it came from here, from government, and all this relief.
It was never streamlined.
All the other interventions, orphans and vulnerable children, interventions of that nature, need to be brought together.
I hear you.
And we synergize, so that we have this system that first of all has enough data. We already launched a single registry when we launched the National Social Protection Policy. But a single registry which has information that cannot be even utilized. It is not populated. There is no data to talk about, because up to yesterday, NIRA is telling us they don't have the correct figures of just the older persons. And I told them, can we use our councillors who represent older persons at lower local governments to come with their rudimentary information, and you just fit in your computers and you call that your data? Because we can't remain like this when we have all this happening, and it cannot bring us to a systematic way of handling this issue.
Besides synergizing,
and for me,
go ahead.
On the social protection aspect, the idea of government sticking to targeting vulnerable persons using national IDs, for me, is very discriminatory.
Because many do not have them.
Because not all people have them.
Thank you.
Even those who have them, their names were misspelled, their ages were written badly, and so they have to correct them and everything. It is still a mess, and therefore government should allow for alternative identification. The way the Ministry of Health did when we were taking the COVID jab, they could allow you to identify yourself alternatively if you didn't have an identity card.
Indeed.
So why can't this have been done when Nabanja's money was being distributed? Because very many people were left behind, including
I remember people running to NIRA
and
hoping to get an ID in 2 weeks. That usually takes 3 months.
And it didn't happen. So the national ID should stop being the means to target vulnerable persons until we streamline it and understand that everybody now has an ID, so that we can now say, okay, we can now use our IDs. But as we talk, the IDs cannot cannot work, and therefore the whole system is bad. At the sub-county level, they are now enrolling the older persons to go to the payroll. But whoever doesn't have an ID will not access the payroll.
Honorable Kabahenda, besides the negation of national IDs as a requirement and also expediting concerted efforts to pull all this money into a single fund that could actually reach more beneficiaries, what else should we expedite to ensure that we cover more people with these social protection programs?
I think the National Social Protection Policy is only advisory. It has very, very good ideas of using the family as the first intervention.
Indeed.
We know we have broken families. Yes, they may be still living together, but they are broken even when they are together. So if we have to use family, then the idea of parenting must come out. The dialogue on parenting must come out very prominently. Secondly, we now want a law where we shall even penalize those who will not comply, and so that we cause everybody right from the family to make sure they have a system of social protection in their family, and then we can go ahead to the other structures. So for us as members of parliament, we are looking at a law, a bill, that if government delayed, we may raise it as private members, so that the social protection does not end at only the policy, but we have a law that compels not only government but all of us. Let it be our business for us to ensure that the system of social protection is intact. It captures everybody. It knows when you fall into vulnerability, it knows when you fall out, and so the intervention is readily there. When you lose a job, you have a cushion.
Indeed.
Until you can be employed again. When you are hit by a border and you are now hospitalized in Mlago, some system must be able to capture and put you where you are supposed to be. So we need that law that has penalties, that has sanctions, where all the duty bearers will be compelled to act for the good of the rights holders.
Honorable Flavia Kabahenda, we do also have a policy specialist within our midst. Patrick Katabazi is a policy specialist working with the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. Let's get those recommendations on how we could cover more beneficiaries as far as social protection programs are concerned, on how best we should actually strengthen these social protection programs. I know you do have pointers on the NSSF fund and what needs to be done to strengthen it as a social protection tool. Go ahead.
Yes, I think we need to improve our funding, public financing for social protection. That's key. You realize that most of the programs are not well funded. Even those who are funded, every year in and out, you have unfunded gaps in there. So the social protection system should be our approach. The National Development Plan 3 talks about it. So, but we need to see it working so that from day one somebody is born up to the time of the evening of somebody's life, you have a system that is clear cut, and you know this is where I fall in the case of any vulnerability or potential vulnerability surfaces. So the other thing that I think I would recommend really is to have a working registry, so that if we have a calamity, it could be a mudslide in Bududa, we should be able by the click of the button to know everybody in Mountain Ergon area who has had a problem.
Instead of clamoring to start registering.
You start registering, you take months, people are already having these challenges, people are homeless, so the same should extend to all categories of vulnerable persons. So the registry is a very important tool that needs to be put in place. And of course the other thing is to mainstream social protection almost in all government programs, because you realize that social protection clearly cuts across. It's not an older person's thing, and for me then that also brings me back to NSSF. So one of the things that we should do as a country is to ensure that, for example, we skill the young people, we skill the working group, ensure that they have that income. When they have that income, then there is a strong mechanisms for saving or for making contributions, such as NSSF. And once you have money coming in, then the question of the day should be, how do we make NSSF work? NSSF is good in the current form. It is providing high interest rate above market rates in my view, but As soon as you clock the qualifying age, you get the money out.
Yes, yes.
You spend it in, the studies indicate that in 2 years, 90% of the people who receive the money have finished it.
Indeed.
And then what happens? Vulnerability starts in even when you have been saving for the rest of your life.
I hear you.
That's why for me, I would think that transforming NSSF at some stage as a pension program would be good.
Policy specialist
yes,
Patrick
I could get
Katabasi,
I could get a certain percentage upon getting a qualifying age, but I could have the rest spread in about 15 years, and that possibly after 60 years would be quite important.
So you're clamoring for early access?
No, not early access. If I qualify at 55, I could get a small percentage.
Yeah.
But then the bigger percentage is spread.
Oh yeah, over the years.
Over the years.
Not to dole out the money at once.
Yes, at once.
I hear you on that one. Policy specialist Patrick Katabasi, thank you very much. Let's also get recommendations coming in from Honorable Flavia Kabahende on the same. The bill is being sent back to you, the NSSF bill. You're going to be scrutinizing it. Bring us up to speed, and help us get more information on that.
Yeah, the bill has come back, and I know most of the work had been done by the 10th Parliament. Only that because of rules and procedures, we couldn't just inherit it from the 10th Parliament. We had to table it afresh. It was tabled yesterday and sent to my committee, and I'm given only 10 days for the committee to process it and bring it back to the House. There are only 4 areas where His Excellency contended, and we are going to look at those areas. So we are not going to go into so much because a lot was done, and I'm sure all the people who gave their input were satisfied at the time when
does the process begin?
Was passed. I think I'm beginning the process Tuesday next week.
Tuesday next week.
And I'm sure by Thursday, 20th October, when the 10 days are up, we shall be.
We've run out of time, Flavia, but do you think social protection programs like the Nabanja money, the 100,000 COVID-19 relief fund, should be a continuous process and not a one-off, as is the system now?
Well, it can be hybrid. Even if it were a one-off, for us what we think is that the targeting should be spontaneous if we had a system. So that even if you gave them a one-off, that would suffice for them. But for me, what I'm saying is financing.
All right, thank you very much. Financing is the biggest
social protection
factor
is the elephant in the room.
All right, that is Honorable Flavia Kabahende. She is the Gender Committee Chairperson. We also do have Mr. Patrick Katabasi. Thank you very much for having made the time to speak to us ahead of the International Day of Older Persons. Social protection programs are a big development initiative that can also be compounded by funding, like you did say. Thank you very much for coming through. Well, that's it for this edition of Morning at NTV. My name is Romeo Busiku. Special thanks to the team.